Good morning. Thank you for joining me today for Storytime with Miss Pam for the Upper Chichester Library. We're getting a few snowflakes out there today. Personally, I've had enough snow. I'm ready for spring. How about you? But we're still in winter, so we do have to just enjoy each day and the blessings that are ours. Today's first story is When This World Was New. I see some snowflakes on there, don't you? It's by D.H. Figueredo, and it's a Lee and Low Books out of New York. So I hope you enjoy this story about when this world was new. It was our first day in this country. My parents and I came in the night before from an island on an ocean that was warm and far away. We had to take 2 planes. The first plane flew low over clear waters. I looked out the window at the boats beneath us. I saw large stingrays swimming near the surface of the sea. Papa looked out the window with me. He seemed worried. Mama was very quiet. We landed at a small airport near a beach, but we didn't stay there. We moved on to another plane. This was a jet. We flew high over the clouds and into the night. I was excited, but I was also scared. After a few hours in the air, we landed at a big airport. There were hundreds of people running from one end of the terminal to the other. They were carrying suitcases and packages and boxes. They didn't smile and they didn't speak in Spanish. I took Mama's hand and held it tightly. At the gate, Uncle Berto was waiting. When he saw me, he called out my name. Donalito, Donalito. He ran to greet us. He was happy. He was in this country alone. He was glad to have relatives around once again. Uncle Berto led us to his car. He drove along a highway that was as long as a comet's tail. Cars sped past us as fast as meteors. The light shining through the windows of the tall buildings reminded me of the stars of a Caribbean night. That gives us a clue, doesn't it, that they came from the Caribbean. And they're coming to this country. Let's hear the rest of the story. Uncle Berto was talking about America. He liked it here, but he said the winters were cold and long and that you could fall on ice and hurt yourself. He said that you had to speak English, but it was not easy to learn a new language, and that Los Americanos were kind, but there were a few who were not friendly toward foreigners. I was a foreigner, and I didn't speak English, and I didn't know how to walk on ice. I was scared. Papa had worries too. He wanted to take Mama to a doctor. She had not been feeling well. She looked sad lately, and she worried a lot. He told Uncle Berto that in order to help Mama, he needed money. To make money, he needed a job. But how could he find a job in a new country? How could he buy Mama medicine? How could he buy food for us and clothes and rent an apartment? Mama nodded as Papa asked these questions. Uncle Berto nodded as well. He told Papa that everything would be fine, that it was just a matter of time. That would be kind of unsettling, wouldn't it, to move to a whole new country where you didn't have a job or money and you didn't even speak the language? Let's find out how it turns out for them. Uncle Berto left the highway to cross a bridge. He drove down a ramp and up a hill and down a road that went through a park. Then he slowed a bit and stopped in front of a house. It was a small house built of wood. It stood next to a clearing on the side of a small hill. We went inside. There was a living room and a kitchen and 2 bedrooms. All the rooms had furniture. Uncle Berto pointed at lots of cans of food on the kitchen table. Comido para una semana, he said. Food for a week. He pointed to a pile of winter clothes on a bed in one of the bedrooms. Ropa de invierno, he said. Winter clothes. He gave Papa the key. Wow, Uncle Berto's really helping them out with an apartment and furniture and clothes and food. The next morning, Papa came into my bedroom. Donalito, he whispered. He wanted me to get up. It was still dark. The shade on the window was down. I sat on the edge of the bed. Papa had on clothes he'd never worn before. Boots, heavy pants, a coat, and a scarf. He helped me into a pair of boots. He gave me a coat. But my arms couldn't find the sleeves. I was not used to winter clothing. I was still scared. Everything was happening so fast. On my first day here, I had to go to a new school where no one knew Spanish. How could I tell the teacher? I had to go to the bathroom. How could I learn my lessons? Have you ever had to move to a new school or live in a new place? I told Papa that I should not go to school. I thought Uncle Berto should teach me some English first. But Papa said that I was a good student and that I would do well in any language. Then he told me there was something he wanted me to see. He took me to the living room. There, I saw a magic I had never seen before. I ran to the window. Outside, there were millions of white rose petals floating downwards. What is that? Are those rose petals? What do you think that is? Nieve, Papa said. Snow. Buttoning his coat, he opened the door. I followed him out. The front steps and the sidewalk and the street were all gone, vanished under a powder that was as white and fine as sugar. The parked cars had become polar bears. There were no sounds. All was still but for the falling snow. Parked cars do kind of look like big old white animals, don't they, when they're all covered with snow? But they're not really polar bears, are they? Papa stepped on the sidewalk. I thought he might slip, but he didn't. I stepped down. My feet sank softly into the snow. I tilted my head backward. Flakes touched my face, melting on my cheeks. Papa cupped his hands and shaped the snow into a ball. He pitched it at a street sign. He missed, but didn't try again. He wasn't wearing gloves, and his hands were getting cold. He turned to the field by the house. In the silence of the snow, he trudged over. The field rose gently. The snow falling on the clearing was so white and pure, it seemed as if a slice of a cloud had floated down to earth. Papa began to walk towards the top of the hill. I walked beside him. He was breathing hard, steam puffing from his mouth. His nose was red and shiny. His face was wet, as if bathed by a spray from a wave. It felt like we were walking on a sand dune, but much colder. So he's only used to the beach and the sand, and he's never seen snow before. The climb tired us. Our toes were icy and ticklish. Up to now, we had neither looked back nor down. We turned around and looked at the field. On the white, clear snow, we saw our footprints. The initial tracks were clumsy, crooked, leaning to one side, but the rest were deep and firm, one set of prints larger than the other. Papa studied his footprints. "That's something I've always wanted to do," he said. He placed his arm around me, and we stood together, my body leaning against his. We didn't move, as if we were frozen. The gentle patches we had made stretched before us, a large signature on the expanse of a wide scroll. The sound of a horn came from behind our house. It was Uncle Berto in his car. Neighbors began to come out. Shovels scraped the sidewalk. Engines were turned on. "We have to go," Uncle Berto called out. Papa and I went back to the house to say goodbye to Mama. She surprised us. She was not sleeping, but standing by the window, and she was smiling. It was the first time she had smiled in a long time. She embraced Papa, and then she kissed me. Papa and I climbed into Uncle Berto's car. He said he'd take me to school first, and afterward he'd take Papa to a factory that needed workers. As Uncle Berto drove past the field, I looked at our footprints in the snow. Papa, sitting in the front, was also looking at the prints. He turned to me. He smiled. I smiled back. I was still scared, but not as much. Look, I even see a snowman out there. Did they make that snowman, do you think? Maybe. He wasn't as scared. He even got to do something fun. What's he doing there? He's ice skating, isn't he? Have you ever done ice skates? Well, that was a pretty good story. When this world was new. I like that. Do you know anybody that can speak Spanish? I cannot. So I may have messed up some of those words when I read the Spanish words, but I tried to do my best. The next story is a Caldecott honor book. It's The Relatives Came by Cynthia Ryland. She's one of my favorite authors. This is a scholastic book. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. Have you ever had relatives come for a visit? Did they stay with you? They drove all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. It's a fun yard. Look at that tree swing. When I was a little girl, we had a tree swing. I loved my tree swing. Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. It seems like they hugged us for hours. Oh, look, who's coming? Grandpa's coming, isn't he? You see, he has a cane to help him walk safely. Then it was into the house, and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. I think they missed them, didn't they? They were so happy to get to visit. And finally, after a big supper 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was a quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. There are a lot of people to feed, aren't there? It looks like they have a big table with the food on it, and the kids are at the little kids' table. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras. So a few squeezed in with us and the rest slept on the floor, some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. They sure have squeezed a lot of people into that bed, haven't they? Do you have to share your bed or your room when you have people stay at your house? It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. Looks like some of them brought sleeping bags or just put blankets on the floor. The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden and they fixed any broken things they could find. Now that's a lot of company to have for a long time, isn't it? They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. Oh, I think they like music. I see. What do you see? A banjo, a violin, a guitar, and a big bass. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. Oh boy, it looks like they've had a great visit. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia. At 4 in the morning, we stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road, and then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet, and we fell asleep. Maybe they missed all the busyness in their house now that the relatives had gone home. What do you think? And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer. Oh, it sounds like they'll come and visit again next summer. There's the grapes. Well, that was a good story about relatives. The relatives came and they came to visit. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Both of these books are available at the Upper Chichester Library. And you can come in. We're still just doing curbside service, but we'll pick out any books you want and you can pick them up at the door. Thanks again for coming. I hope you have a great week. Enjoy another snowy day. Be safe out there. And I'll see you again next Monday at 10:30 for story time with Miss Pam for the Upper Chichester Library. Bye for now. Bye-bye.